Line in the social contract between the people and their chosen leaders is integrity. In the absence of that, the most impressive acts of statesmanship are not enough. The whole art of government, said Jefferson, consists in the art of being honest. As for Richard Nixon, the man, what we are seeing, in the words of one White House official today, is a case of psychic suicide.
Hey, maybe you should do this. You know, you're a lot better looking than me. Huh? Hey, that's enough now, Ollie. The other guys will only get mad if I give you too many.
Mr. President.
What?
This is the perfect angle.
Yeah, okay. One last shot. Hey, I'd like you to be generous with that powder of yours, you know, that probably told you. I tend to perspire. Thank you. Hey, back off, Ollie. Jeez. My friend Ollie, he always wants to take a lot of pictures of me, and I'm afraid he's going to catch me picking my nose. You know? Well, he wouldn't print that, though. Would you, Ollie?
No, sir.
Yeah. Manolo, come here. Could you check my collar in the back? And you make sure that it's straight. It's not roughed up or anything.
You look fine, Mr. President.
Thank you.
This is indeed an historic day, the only time a president has ever resigned from office in our nearly 200 years of history.
All right, Mr. President, it's time.
15 seconds, Mr. President. Okay, that's 5, 4, 3.
Good evening. This is the 37th time I have spoken to you from this office, where so many decisions have been made that have shaped the history of our nation. Each time I have done so to discuss with you some matter that I believe affected the national interest.
So you did follow the Watergate hearings?
Like everyone else, I'd watched the Watergate drama play out in my own living room. I'd been glued to the Select and Judiciary Committee hearings night after night, and then finally, it had come to this.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency, effective at noon tomorrow. To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. I have never been a quitter, but I do so secure in the knowledge that America is a better country and the world a safer place than when I came to power 5.5 years ago. To have served in this office is to have felt a very personal sense of kinship with each and every American. I leave with no bitterness towards those who have opposed me. I leave with this prayer. May God's grace be with you in all the days ahead.
And we are out.
Mr. David Frost.
Hello, good evening. And with the eyes of the world focused on the White House, here in Australia, burglars have broken into a meat factory in Brisbane and stolen a ton of pork sausages. Queensland police are looking for men in a long, thin getaway car. Now, my first guest tonight grew up in a tin hut in New South Wales by the age of 5. She was hitting tennis balls against a wall with a piece of wood. A few weeks ago, she became the first Aboriginal Australian to win Wimbledon. She also got engaged to be married. Ladies and gentlemen, Yvonne Goolagong. Well, you can't do it. We won't allow it.
Do what?
You cannot change your name. Goolagong is the most famous name in Australia. Is there another reason? Something you're not telling us? Your husband's first name isn't Ging Gang.
No, it's Roger.
Well, that's it for Frost Over Australia this week. See you next time. God bless.
Great show, David.
Oh, bless you, no.
Yvonne, she's a real diamond, isn't she?
She is.
We have done some things wrong.
Well done, Yvonne. Great
Top
show.
man, he
You
always takes
are a real
responsibility
diamond.
for that.
And you too.
Nixon
And I
saying
wanna
farewell
say-
to his White House staff.
One
Well, this is
thing.
live.
Yeah.
Mistakes, yes. But
What
for
time is it in
personal
Washington?
gain, never.
9
I
a.m.
remember my old
Why didn't you wait? 6 in the morning on the West Coast. Half his audience
No, he
is still
was.
asleep.
He was a street
All right, you
club
blokes,
alderman
let's
first,
get this set broken
then he
down.
was a farmer. And then he had a lemon ranch. It was the poorest lemon ranch in California. He sold it before they found oil on it. And nobody will ever write a book about my mother, but my mother was a saint. I know all of you out there would say that about all your mothers, but believe me, my mother was a saint. Well, as you know, I kind of like to read books, you know. I'm not educated, but I do read books. And last night I was reading a book, TR, you know, and I'd like to read you a quote from him, because I think it was a pretty good one. He was talking about a beautiful young woman that he loved, and he said, "And when my heart's dearest died, the light went from my life forever." Well, that was TR in his 20s. He thought the light had gone out of his life forever, but he went on. He served his country, always in, sometimes wrong, sometimes right, but he was a man. And so I say to all of you, always give your best. Never get discouraged. Never be petty. Always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself. Thank you very much. members of the Cabinet, members of the White House staff, all our friends here. I think the record should show that this is, one of those spontaneous things that we always arrange when the president comes to see you. And it'll be reported as such in the press, and we don't mind. They have to call it as they say it. But on our part, believe me, this is spontaneous. Sure, we have done some things wrong, and the top man, he always takes responsibility. I've never ducked it. But I want to say one thing. Mistakes, yes, but never for personal gain. Not one person in this administration will leave it richer than when he came in. Not one. And people often come up to me and they say, well, what am I going to tell my kids? They look at government and they get the impression everybody's in here for the purpose of, feathering their nest. And I say to them, there are many fine careers. This country needs good people, businessmen and farmers, plumbers, carpenters. I remember my old man. You know what he was? He was a streetcar motorman first, and then he was a farmer, and then he had a lemon ranch. It was the poorest lemon ranch in California, I assure you. He sold it before they found oil on it. And nobody probably will ever write a book about my mother, but my mother was a saint. I know. All of you out there say the same thing about your mothers, but believe me. My mother was a saint. As you know, I kind of like to read books, I'm not educated, but I do read books. And last night, I was reading, and there was this quote from T.R. Good old T.R. It was a pretty good quote, and I want to read it to you. He's talking about his young woman in his life, and she died, And he says, and when my heart's dearest died, the light went out of my life forever. Now, that was T.R. in his 20s. And he thought, oh, the light's gone out of my life forever. But he went on. He served his country. Sometimes wrong, sometimes right, but he was a man.
Thanks, Minister. Next week's programme is from Bournemouth and the start of the Labour Party conference. Until then, goodbye.
Just a minute.
Peter, what are you doing? What? You had your foot on his throat and you let him go.
Well, the mic in, you didn't say anything.
But I shouldn't need have to say anything. He broke the law, you should have finished him off.
John, Mr. Frost for you.
Hello, David.
Beat them, John. Beat them with a stick. God knows I still bear my own scars. Now, where do you fancy for lunch? Simpsons or the Caprice? I've booked both.
I'm sorry, I've only got half an hour. I have to be the canteen here at the studios.
The canteen?
So what's so important that it couldn't wait, that it had to be today?
I've had an idea, John. Rather a bold idea for an interview.
Fish and chips, please.
And in a moment of... well, it's too late now, it's done. I've called his people, beans, peas and lamb, please, and made an offer. Now, if the subject were to say yes, well, he's rather a big fish that swims in not untricky waters. So, it goes without saying that I'd want a dear friend and the finest producer I know by my side.
So, who is it?
Richard Nixon.
Richard Nixon.
Oh, come on, don't look like that.
Well, how would you expect me to look? I spent yesterday evening watching you interview the Bee Gees.
Weren't they terrific?
Okay, so what kind of interview?
A full, extensive look back over his life, his presidency.
And?
And what?
Come on, David. Surely the only thing that would interest anyone about Richard Nixon would be a confession. A full, no-holds-barred confession.
Well, we'll get that, Chick.
From Richard Nixon?
Come on, John. Just think of the numbers it would get. Do you know how many people watched his farewell speech in the White House? 400 million.
Yeah, as it happens, we took the whole question of security very seriously. There were very strict confidentiality clauses for everyone involved. And from day one, we kept all our files in a locked safe.
Who was the guy that Mike interviewed? Was that Holden?
Holden. And Ehrlich.
And Ehrlich, I always get the Germans mixed up, so I'm a little confused about that.
Disaster.
What is Haldeman's official... Hello, darling.
Chief of Staff.
Head of domestic affairs. Well, since the ex-president's name attracted an awful lot of attention, we would refer in telexes to the subject. And when we were researching in restaurants and so on, Nixon would become...
William Holden, possibly.
William Holden.
Okay. Charlton Heston.
Holden's good.
All right, how about Chuck Berry?
Look, I'm sorry, Phyllis, I've got to get going. I'll see you tomorrow, or Thursday.
As for the work over the months, we divided it into 3 sections. Bert took Vietnam, Bob took foreign and domestic policy, and I got Watergate and the abuses of power. And David, we never really saw much of David.
Okay, so how should we kick this off? What should the first question be?
First question should be a loosener, you know. Sorry to hear about Miss Nixon and her stroke, you know, how's the phlebitis, how's retirement treating you?
Bob's right.
The definite click you will hear, Bob, is with 40 million Americans turning off their TV
Well,
set.
what do you want to do, throw him a tightener? He's
soft.
already paranoid.
Good evening. As most of you know, there was an attempt on the life of President Ford in San Francisco today. The second time in 17 days, his life has been directly in danger.
Yeah, take that for pardoning Nixon.
You know, John Q. Public has no freaking idea what the Houston plan is, so you got to make it digestible. You can see the seeds of dirty tricks. Essentially, it's an attempt to legalize dirty tricks.
That's why you got to get David to put it in the question. You got to wiretapping students, opening people's mail.
You mean
what
front
do you
load?
want?
You mean front loading into the question?
Yes, exactly. What do you want?
Carbonara. You try the carbonara?
They don't have carbonara. You want to look at the menu again? So yeah,
Carbonara, right there. What about wiretapping?
How many people?
But if
did
you say to
wiretap?
him, for
This guy
instance, if you say to him,
wiretapped
how do you feel about
17?
17 people?
Including his own brother. But you know what? We can't ask him about his brother because, frankly, if Donald Nixon was my brother, I'd wiretap him too.
I think we need to talk about imperialism, and bypassing Congress is completely unconstitutional. Imperialism.
How do we frame a question about Cambodia, about the illicit bombing?
I think you should say, how far do you take executive privilege before it becomes an undemocratic event?
I think you frame the question to him as a Quaker.
How do you feel as a Quaker to annihilate an entire people? You still want mayonnaise on your club? If you establish that he has this insecurity, that leads to motive, which leads to Watergate.
Okay, next topic.
This man has a...
You and I will never agree.
Why don't you go out by the pool,
I can make you.
chain yourself to a pool chair, light yourself on fire.
That's funny.
Okay? And then we'll get some facts and figures together, and
then
There's
we'll
a
compare
reason they-
notes. We'll compare
That's
notes.
funny. There's a reason they call him Tricky Dick. We have breaking and entering. We have wiretapping, conspiracy to foster prostitution, and that's Lydia,
Delivery,
right?
pursuit of meat and owls,
We're talking about the plans
finest
of
deli
audit.
selection. Right, what do we need? That Chinese
If they say they're interested in a sponsorship, thank you, just leave it. Then I'll be there, obviously. But how serious are they?
Very good.
It feels so late that it's time for my breakfast.